The Kitchen Madonna continued. How could I have been so silly? Yet as he asked that, he remembered the beauty of the mother's face, the stars around her, the red stones in the orb, the deep blue of the cloak, and he slackened his pace. At least I have seen it, thought Gregory. Then the tone of Mr. Needham's voice as he said, 438 guineas, came back to Gregory, so that again he was scalded with shame. I didn't know anything cost so much, he thought, except great pictures, of course. He knew pictures could cost thousands and thousands of pounds, but the icon was so little. No wonder they had laughed. He was conscious, too, of his shabby school raincoat, glistening with rain, of his school cap that he kicked around. Are you surprised that it looks dusty and frayed? Mother often said. Of his wrinkled socks and scuffed walking shoes. Janet did not look neat either. Her coat was shorter than her dress. Her hair was rough and her socks were coming down. We ought to have dressed, he thought, dressed properly to go to a shop like that. I ought to have thought. Fool, he muttered. Fool, fool. He meant himself, not Janet, but she did not know that. Greg, she said piteously, please, Greg, it's raining very hard. It was. Janet's hair was beginning to look streaked. She was not even wearing a beret, and as she spoke, a drop ran off the end of her snub nose, and she shivered. Even when Gregory was cross, he was a careful brother, and now he looked down the small, dark street they were in, up it and across the way. Then, there's a church, he said. Anyone can go into a church. Quick, run in there. The church was dark, too, made darker by the rain, but when they had shaken the drops out of their eyes and stamped their feet to let water squelch out of their shoes, they saw they were only on the porch. It's got a shop, whispered Janet. Nonsense, said Gregory. Churches don't have shops. But at one side there was a sort of shop full of statues and books and candlesticks. Beyond, in the church itself, they could see a vaulted roof and pillars, and as they walked timidly into it, they saw gold after gold glow made by candles burning in candle stands all along the walls. The glow was warm, inviting after the gloomy morning outside, and they stood looking until Janet pulled Gregory's sleeve. Look, that's what Marta told us about, she said. Little lights in red lamps. In front of a statue, 2 lights burned in small glasses. Ruby red, said Gregory, but Janet had disappeared. Gregory turned irritably to look for her, but in a moment she was back. Greg, she said, they have those lamps in the shop. Gregory came to look, and Janet was right. The lamps were just as Marta had described them, a glass lamp, deep red or sapphire blue, in a silver holder. In each was a round wax light with a wick, like a big night light. Let's buy one for Marta, whispered Janet, and she said they couldn't cost guineas. There was a notice that read, if you want something from the repository, what a funny name for a shop, please ring the bell. Janet rang, and almost at once a small, bent woman in a blue apron came. Please, how much are those? Asked Janet, pointing to the lamps. They were 4 shillings and 6pence each. We can do that, said Gregory. As Janet had seen the lamp first, Gregory let her choose. Only you must choose a red, he said, and a ruby red one, with its light, was wrapped in a newspaper. Gregory carefully paid out 4 shillings and 6pence. Now we have only £1, 6 shillings, and a few pennies left, he said. We have spent so much on fares, and it will be another 8pence today. Yes, 4pence each way, said Janet, and she sighed. We can't buy an icon for 26 shillings. Indeed, it seemed they could not buy any kind of icon. And what use is a lamp without one? Asked Gregory. All the same, the finding of the lamp cheered the day. He carefully wrapped the shillings and the pennies in the pound note, put them in his purse, and put that in his pocket. It was still deluging outside, and to pass the time, Gregory and Janet began to walk around the church, which seemed to have a great many altars where candles burned on stands. There were several people praying, now in the middle of the morning, whispered Gregory, and the children walked on tiptoe until Gregory suddenly stopped, his fingers digging into Janet's arm. Hanging against a pillar was a picture, or not a picture, whispered Janet. It was a Madonna and child, a Jesus Mary, in a heavy painted frame, but both mother and child stood out of the picture. Because they are dressed, whispered Gregory, dressed as Marta had described them, in cloth and gold. The crowns were gold lace, carefully cut. The veil and cloak were blue-edged with silver and stuck with sequins and beads that glittered. The mother's robe was red, patterned with silver, and the child's small robe was red too, covered with silver and beads. Our Lady of Czestochowa, Queen of Poland, said a notice under the picture. That's near Marta's country, said Gregory. Poland and the Ukraine are almost the same. Below the picture, candles threw gold light up so the faces were lit and shadowed, as if they were real, thought Gregory. Their eyes do look at you, whispered Janet, and then she said, It's Marta's icon. In her excitement, she had raised her voice and, Hush, said Gregory. Then he whispered, It's not an icon. He stepped closer to look. We were wrong. It wasn't an icon Marta wanted. It was a dressed-up picture. He looked at the picture more and more carefully. Their clothes are cut out like paper dolls' clothes, he told Janet, and I could make that, said Gregory. But you don't make things, Janet objected. You never did. Only because I didn't want to, said Gregory, and gazing at the picture, he began to plan. I shall need paste, he said. We must find out the best kind, and pieces of cloth, red and blue and dark blue. Then, looking at the picture even more closely, he asked, What sort of cloth? It looks like silk, said Janet. I think, she said, straining up, that at the back it's velvet. Gregory looked too, and it seemed the background behind the mother was pale brown velvet. Velvet's terribly expensive, said Gregory, frowning. You would only need a little, but Gregory began to see he would need a lot, not of velvet. Things, he said, beads, sequins, gold lace. Then we have the picture to buy. We should have to buy a picture to dress up. They stayed planning until the rain stopped and they could come out of the church to go home, Janet clutching the newspaper parcel with the lamp. They both felt warmed and cheered until they got on the bus. When the conductress came along to take their fares, Gregory put his hand in his pocket to find his purse, and his face went white. There was no purse there. He knew at once what had happened. He had put his purse not into his shorts pocket, but into the pocket of his raincoat, the one with the hole, thought Gregory. I meant to ask Marta to mend it for me, he thought in anguish. The purse must have dropped through in the church, on the pavement, or on the road when they ran for the bus, dropped anywhere. The conductress was holding out her hand for the money as the bus thundered along. Come on, we'll have to get off, said Gregory. But Janet, who now and then did not need to be told of calamities, put her hand in her own pocket. You gave me back my pennies, remember, she said. As they were half fares, Janet's pennies took them all the way home. With 1 penny over, said Janet, looking at it. It did not seem much left over from 35 shillings. And your 3 pence, my 9 pence, said Janet. Shouldn't we go back to the church? Gregory had asked. We should be late for lunch, said Janet. We can't tell Mother because we shouldn't have gone by ourselves. The loss of the money was the finishing touch to a dismaying morning. Janet began to cry, and even Gregory had to blink back tears. Never mind, said Janet, though still sniffling. We have the little lamp. What good is a lamp without a picture, said Gregory. That's all for today.